Welcome to the 10-Minute Business Insight on MyNewsroom.ca. Joining me today is Alex Fallon, who's the CEO of SREDA, the Saskatoon Regional Economic Development Agency or Authority. And they've been exploring some really interesting concepts and I guess, sparked by what was going on with COVID and how consumers are both, I think, naturally inclined, but also being encouraged to support local. And that sounds good, sounds easy, but maybe once you get into the nuance, you start to find out that what is local, who is local. So Alex, your team has done some really interesting work on this. I just want to explore that a little bit. You're calling it local link. So maybe just define that for us a bit.
Yeah, thanks, Paul, and great to talk to you today. You're right, the local link, really just an idea we had one day. Literally, I was out for a run and I was thinking about all the shop local messages we've been hearing over the recent weeks. And of course, everyone, I think, supports that initiative. The more we shop local, the better for the local economy, and that's better for everyone. But, got thinking to your point, what is local, and are some companies more local than others? And how do you decide that? Is it where the owners live? Is it how many employees? All those type of questions. And, I always think any business in the Saskatoon region in Saskatchewan is local because they're here, but what's their impact on the economy? And, I remember when I was little, my mom got a job. She was super excited about it. She got a job at Costco when it opened up in Saskatoon, and, not a local company, but I can tell you 3 kids in the household, that was the coolest job ever. So we got to thinking about how would you measure that? And so the local link, it does exactly that. We sit down with the company, we do a bit of quite an audit, but maybe an assessment of that company. And we come up with a grading system on what are they gold, silver, bronze in terms of their impact on the local economy. So yeah, I really started with that background and then trying to measure how local they are.
It's a really interesting question because I've had to wrestle with this myself. Way back in another life, I was the editor of Saskatchewan Business Magazine and put together the first top 100 list. And we kind of had to decide, what is a Saskatchewan company? And so it's not very far removed from the challenge that you were trying to address here. And it is interesting is, the thoughts that went through my mind at the time were Royal Bank and Safeway are pretty big presence in this community or this province, and they have a lot of employees, a lot of real estate. They just have a big presence, but they're not headquartered here. So does that make them a local company or not a local company? And I think that's the same kind of issue you were trying to wrestle with, right?
Absolutely. And of course, part of that debate is some of these non-local companies, well, they employ a lot of people. They have big teams, and so that's obviously good for the economy. We wouldn't want to lose them. So it's exactly that we looked at, and especially I remember my economist teacher, Mr. K, always talking about this. Is how do you measure the impact on the economy, and how do you track which dollars stay here and which leave and go elsewhere? And that's what the local link tries to do. And what we found was it really came down to not ownership for sure. Size of team, yes. But the really interesting thing was looking at a company and seeing to what extent is their supply chain local. So, if you've got a business in Saskatoon, let's say, and the owners live local and they hire 4 people, well, that's great. Those are great jobs. But if they're selling products, goods, services that are all made in another place, another country, wow, what impact does that have versus, say, a maybe smaller company that is creating a product where they source all their material from other local companies or from across Saskatchewan? And that's really what the local link looks at. Is that supply chain, and how much are they buying from within Saskatchewan?
That's not too far removed, Alex, from the conversation we're having around public procurement too. Bigger projects. You see organizations in the province that are dedicated to just trying to convince government, in particular, governments at all levels, to buy, devote more of their expenditures to local suppliers and not to be handing out contracts to Alberta or Quebec firms, which may come in with a lower price. So those same conversations are going on, and the power of local ownership and really how deep your tentacles go in the community. Not a conversation point we've had for a long time, but COVID's caused us to start to uncover that.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's kind of this, it was all about globalization, and that made sense at the time. And I think COVID has kind of brought to the forefront this idea of localization and supply chain and transportation links, and the need to develop things in your own backyard. And I think the other different thing and interesting thing about the local link is, it takes the shop local part of it one step further, because the link part of it is when we look at these companies, and I'll take an example of bottling. So, if we've worked with 3 companies and we find that, yeah, they're local owners, they got local employees, their ingredients, their inputs are locally grown, but they're ordering their bottles from Quebec, and another company is ordering their bottles from BC, and another company is ordering their bottles from, let's say, the US. Well, that's great information and intelligence and economic data for us. And then maybe, SREDA's role, or working with our partners, Government of Saskatchewan and others, we can go, hey, we got enough demand here for a bottle manufacturing facility right here in Saskatchewan if we pool together some of these orders. So it is trying to spot those links in terms of the supply chain. And like I said, if we find companies that are all purchasing something from pick your place, well, maybe if we pool those orders, cut out the transportation costs, the international risk because of COVID, maybe we can build things in that supply chain right here in our own backyard.
Import replacement, it's a topic that's been around for a long time. What can we source locally that we're sourcing from, out of market right now? This would have been before your time at SREDA, but way back when there was something called SMO in this province, the Saskatchewan Manufacturing Opportunities Conference, and it was a reverse trade show concept that was put together really by the Crowns, and I think it was kind of led by SaskPower, but SaskTel, all the major Crowns were there, and they basically laid out on tables, this is all the stuff we buy for our day-to-day needs from outside of the province. And they invited Saskatchewan manufacturers to go in and say, anything here you could replace, like you could produce. And, the one that really stood out for me was we were buying wooden cross arms for power poles from a company in Brandon. Now, how that came to pass, Brandon, hardly the forestry center of the universe, but anyway, they were able to say, somebody from Meadow Lake could say, I could do that. And a lot of, actually there were businesses created from that, and we've lost that, I think. And to me, what you're touching on here is looking at supply chain and really uncovering this, sort of really examining it, is bringing back that concept again. And it's not protectionist, it's more information exchange.
Totally. It's information exchange, and it's creating that entrepreneurial spark, and if someone can fill it locally, great. And if they can't, that's okay. Then it makes sense to purchase it elsewhere. And I think also, from SREDA's perspective, we get the need for international trade and exports. And obviously, on one hand, STEP and other organizations, we want our companies to be exporting. So it's not really fair if we don't import ourselves, right? So yep. It's interesting. I think we need both. We need locally sourced goods where we can, and it makes sense. And where it doesn't make sense in terms of quality or price or expertise, then definitely it makes sense to buy that elsewhere. But you want to make sure you have a good balance, especially COVID has changed that.
Do you need to get more companies coming forward to you and say, put me through your audit process?
Yeah, definitely. We've had, great initial response. About almost 20 companies have been through that process. But yeah, definitely the more that apply, the better, because I think they'll find it useful. And then also from a consumer perspective, if this really takes off and we have 200, 300, 400, 500 companies take part in this, then it's great information for the customer to decide where they want to buy from. And that's why we've partnered with the Chamber of Commerce, Prairie Sky Chamber of Commerce, and others to promote the program, because the more that do it, the more information we're going to get as well about where are those gaps and what can we create here.
Alex, really informative. I want to thank you for this. 10 minutes just goes by in a heartbeat, and plus your Amazon package from some faraway destination just arrived at your house. So I'll let you go and get that. So thanks very much for joining us. Alex Fallon, the CEO of SREDA, the Saskatoon Regional Economic Development Agency. Thank you very much.